One, two, three. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's another episode of the Three Amigos, and today we're going to be talking about the best small businesses you can start in 2020. And to kind of guide us in this voyage is Ron, who's had almost 40 years of experience in marketing and growing businesses. So I think you're going to be in for a treat here. I'm excited to learn more. I always learn a lot from Ron. So without any further comment, Ron, take it away and give us some insights as to what we should be starting or what our clients should be starting in these unusual times.
Yeah, well, you're right. Thank you, Ray. It certainly is an unusual time, and but I don't think that the COVID time has a lot to do. Well, no, I'm going to take that statement that I almost made back. COVID is going to push forward the things that we've already been trending on, and as a result, we're going to see it faster. We'll talk a little bit about some of those things. But for the most part, the kinds of trends that we're going to look at and talk about today really are have been underway for many years. It just is that we're further down the road and COVID is pushing everything forward a little bit faster. But then there are some things like lack of capital, lack of understanding and, say, business knowledge that have been around forever that small businesses need to consider. But there are some changes, and so I think it'll be interesting to go through some of those. So let's get started, and then we'll all comment on what some of the different businesses might be. So what we're really going to talk about here then is what are the best small businesses to start in the 2020s. And so if you're a young person looking to start a business in the next decade, or an old person, but if you're trying to start a business, what are some of the things to look to? What kinds of businesses, what kind of characteristics might we look at? The problem is that as a small business person, there are a million things to consider and understand. Unlike a big business that has departments to be able to figure out payroll and new COVID requirements and properly paying people when they're terminated or when they quit, and all of those government regulations, the small business person has to understand and know that. So if you're a business, by yourself or just a couple of people, you really need to understand government regulation. That's something that you can get from the outside, but however you slice it, government regulation, especially in California, has never been so difficult. And brand new regulation that is really pointed, well, not pointed directly at small business, except for the gig law, which we may talk about a little bit, but small businesses really regulated more than by the legislation the last 18 months than any time I can remember. A second thing is distribution. This has really changed a lot. Now, distribution is really just this opportunity to take the product or the service that you have and get it to the final customer. And if you happen to, want to open a nail salon, that's pretty easy because you're literally applying your product to the customer right at that moment. You don't need to have distribution. But if you're making blue widgets, you've got to get them to a store that sells blue widgets, because if they cost 10 cents a piece, you're not able to sell them one at a time. You've got to have a variety of distribution. And also, you have to deal with transportation. So distribution really includes the various people that sell different assortments of products to specific customers, and the transportation in order to get it from wherever your product is made and to where they are. And so nobody has to go very far to take a look at the transformation in overall distribution. All you have to do is look at your Amazon account, and you'll understand very quickly how some radical changes have happened in the last 10 or 15 years. If in fact you're an 18, 19-year-old person, maybe just getting out of college, you may not even recognize how different things are with Amazon than they were a few years ago. But businesses are still trying to figure out how to deal with this new distribution disruption And so that's a major deal. So we'll talk about businesses that can get around that and or utilize and enhance their business through the distribution mechanisms. And of course, technology is another huge driver. And that is that technology is really affecting most kinds of businesses that we see. We've talked about Amazon. There's a huge revolution going on in manufacturing today with automation and robotics that will make huge differences in how we make things. We were just talking a moment ago before we went on air about 3D printing and the promise that we'll be able to simply take a digital file and turn it into a physical object. That's an amazing concept, and it really changes the whole concept and distribution of certain kinds of products. So technology is also very much in the office because of the accounting systems that are available today that were not available or widely used 15, 20 years ago. And then, of course, the internet really changes a lot in the amount of new kinds of thinking, new products, new ideas, new concepts that have been put on the internet, even in the last 3 or 4 years, is mind-boggling. It's really amazing the kinds of things that are available to connect businesses together, employees with employees, employees with their employers, with their customers, distributors, et cetera. So the whole ball of technology is just amazing, and small businesses are going to really need to consider technology when they decide what kind of a business to open up. Over here, we've got mature markets, which really has to do with saturated markets. We'll talk briefly a little bit more about that in each one of these, but mature markets is a real problem because if you go into a market that's already filled with competitors or there are monopolies, you have to do something that's starkly different to differentiate your product or service from whoever is your competition. And so that can happen, but you better be very aware of the kinds of hurdles you're going to have to recover there. As a result, the reverse of that is finding a very narrow niche market that you can survive in and not get gobbled up by the big guys and beat up on say, price. Finally, one of the biggest problems is capital. And most small businesses start with very little money. I've started 5 businesses, and I don't think I invested more than $15,000 or $20,000 in any one of them. Of course, some of those are dollars that go way back to the 70s, so maybe I'll push that up to, say, $40,000 today. But you can start a business with not a lot of capital, but you have to be really aware of how fast you grow, how much more capital you may need, when you're going to plan for it. And so for the most part, many businesses are prohibited by small brand new companies because they don't have adequate capital in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which would be an appropriate amount of money to be able to start some of these businesses that have good ideas. So capital has always been and will always be a problem. That's the wonder of capitalism. And that is that when there are really good ideas, that people understand the markets, it's amazing how the capital can go from where it is to where it needs to be. In no other society other than a capitalist one is capital available for entrepreneurs that are literally broke and have no money and have no resources. But if they have the right ideas, in a capitalist country, you can find the money to actually give that business a try. And so let's move on from here. This is just a tabular form of the same kinds of problems you run into. If you think you want to open a hardware type store, well, you've got government regulations. It's a saturated market. It's hugely capital intensive. You have to own all your inventory. One of the founders of Home Depot said on the news a couple of months ago, he's sure he sure hates government regulation, but on the other hand, it's ensured that nobody can ever go into business against them because they have a huge department trying to deal with the chemical nature of what they do in Home Depot. So if you don't have a huge department, and he said, literally, nobody could start a business and go against us today because it'd be too expensive for a new business to be able to start. Right. So they literally, the regulation has literally enabled Lowe's, Home Depot, and 2 or 3 others to be in business.
Well, and in fact, if this observation right now, obviously Ed and I had the pleasure of working with a company that without those regulations, they wouldn't exist at all. And it's so I think what you're saying, Ron, that sometimes these regulatory things can be a niche. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, absolutely it is. It can make or break a business. There are a whole lot of individual people out there who are doing OSHA compliance consulting. So right. There's a job, there's a business right there simply because of government regulation. Right. However, it doesn't take too much of an argument to say that government is picking the winners based on the regulation that they impose. Not too many of us are in favor of that kind of thing, but it absolutely does create businesses. There's no question about that. The question is, I suppose overall, if we talk about economics, is that a good use of our overall capital, or should we be doing something a little less regulatory to be able to increase all of our standards of living as opposed to just a couple of specialists? We're not going to go through each one of these, but it just gives you an idea. It just gives you an idea of what kinds of barriers are in the way. And we'll mention only restaurants because, yes, they are regulated and heavily regulated under COVID. Makes a lot of sense. But they're also capital intensive in that you've got to have a physical plant. You have to be able to have enough cash to buy the food. You need the money to pay the people. Sometimes a small restaurant requires a small amount of capital, however. So while capital is needed in most of these things, sometimes it can be small. But one reason restaurants are owned by so many independents today is because it's easier to get into a restaurant business than, say, it is to a hardware business. And so that's a sort of the lifting of barriers of entry. So here we have the way markets run. They go in an S curve. At the very top, you can see that this is a mature market where there's very little growth. It's flat. And that's 90% of the businesses right there in mature markets. So that's where most businesses are. It's difficult to get into a mature market. And so that means that a new business has to be thinking a lot smaller than that. And then you've got the rapidly growing businesses, which go from about here to up to the mature markets. And those rapidly growing businesses are a good time to get into a business, but because they're rapidly growing, they attract a lot of other people into the business, everybody trying to cash in because they didn't want to prove the concept, they just want to make money off the concept. And so what you end up having is a lot of consolidation as the market slows down and there's a saturation on that particular market. And so, and they, of course, they become mature markets eventually. And then, of course, you've got emerging markets. And that's this long period of time here where you're coming up with a new idea that is a concept that people don't know or understand yet. And so it takes a long time for them to be able to figure that out. I've been on that side of business more times maybe than I would like to have been. And in terms of getting into the internet business, I was very interested in it in 1995. Began to watch it very carefully, was convinced by 1996 or 7 that this was going to be explosive and would change our lives, and actively sought to understand it. And so by 1998, my company started building websites for existing clients, and by 2000, we were we had 4 or 5 people building websites, and by 2006, we had 10 people building websites. So that's a business that took a long time for people to understand. And, today probably 95% of all businesses or more have a website. So there were 30 million, 40, 50, 100 million websites built in a period of 10, 15 years. But, that business is 20 some years old now. It's not a emerging business anymore. I mean, the internet business is mature. Now, pieces inside there aren't, but the internet itself is mature and websites are mature.
Well, I think, and you've kind of helped us here because that gave us an example of something that went through all 3 stages. Because right now, these are mature markets, I would think. It's really hard, to try to start a business and website. It's really kind of futile at this point because there have been so many technological changes. People don't need the kind of resources that you were able to provide back in the late 90s. Is that a fair assumption?
That's right on target. When I started, in the late 90s, webmasters were making $50,000, in 1998 dollars to $50,000. They were doing pretty well. That's because it required coding and how many people knew how to code. And then there was another little special thing there. I mean, the first websites, you may remember, were pretty god-awful ugly. They were very, very basic. Sometimes they were text only on black backgrounds, and eventually, what happened is that the coders were inventing new ways to be able to allow graphics to be embedded within HTML, and so that eventually made it so that people could actually build better looking ones. But you had the technical people who didn't have the artistic ability, and so you needed the artistic ability to be overlapped with that, and that made it, in the early days up till 2004, that made it a very specialized business because not very many businesses could understand both the technical and the artistic side. So that's what enabled us to grow so rapidly, is because we were able to do that.
Yeah.
And so there are many pieces now in the internet that are still growing very rapidly, and in marketing and the internet overall that are still growing very, very rapidly because there's still new ideas. Automated marketing systems like HubSpot, which you're familiar with, Salesforce.
Infusionsoft.
Yes, Infusionsoft, exactly. These kinds of good systems that help you do inward bound or outward bound marketing, or track customers, or do all of it. Those systems are now common, and that is still a very much a growing business. And there's still a lot of opportunity to be in that business. But there's no opportunity to write the software to be in that business. That's already done. See, there's an opportunity to service that business, but not to create it. It's pretty much been created. So now let's take another look at what kinds of businesses there are, just in terms of the things that happen within a business. And here we have 2 poles. One, we have very low competition. And my example there I always use is the guy who owns a well in the desert. The closest well is 100 miles away. He has no competition, and he has a great business because he's got the only well, and everybody needs water. And then on the other end, you have high competition. And my example there is the Eskimo who lives on an ice field, and he's trying to sell Eskimo ice bricks. Well, everybody is standing on an ice brick. All he has to do is cut it. It's a very hard sale. And so that's the old thing, selling ice to Eskimos. So every business is somewhere in between those 2 poles, every one of them. So the question is, how's your business going to be? Are you going to be closer to ice, the selling ice to Eskimos, or selling, having people stand in line to buy water from you at the highest prices? So everything's in between. Then on the other side, you have transactional businesses versus relational businesses. And relational businesses are ones where the business doesn't really exist unless there is a relationship. That has to do with, say, consulting in our business and accounting. Legal businesses are very much like that. And many times hair salons are like that. It's you can go to a million different hair salons. They all do the same thing. So you go to the one who does a good job, but is also a friend of yours, or you become a friend with the proprietor and customer, and they become friends, and therefore they've locked in a little teeny business, a micro niche business, and it's completely built on relationships. On the other hand, if you're going to buy gum, you don't have a relationship with anybody that you buy gum with. You just pick it up because you happen to be going through the checkout stand in the store. You seldom go to the store to buy gum. It's something you just pick up. So you've got all these different relationships. So the question then is, well, where do people fit? And so CPAs are down in the relationship. Attorneys are the same, except they kind of go, depending on what kind of business they're in, they go towards transactional a little bit. Real estate agents, highly relational, but it's also somewhat competitive, depending on what kind of firm that you have. Casualty insurance, a little less so. You just call people on the phone, you get the number. You may know that your agent. You probably do know your agent for life insurance, but you may not know your agent for casualty insurance. Retail business is a much wider swath. It goes from no competition for highly specialized businesses to very heavy competition, but it mostly is towards transactional. The days of going to buy a suit from a guy who you bought suits from for 20 days are long gone. Those of us in our age group may remember buying suits that way.
Yep.
I used to, when I was in high school, I used to go into the menswear store. They knew me by name and I knew them by name, even though they were 20, 30 years older than I was. And that was a relationship business in those days. That's over and done. Retail business is mostly transactional. A hardware business, you don't know the hardware store anymore because they put all those nice little hardware stores out of business, although so, and then cement manual. So you have all of these different kinds of businesses that fall in these different ones. The question here is, where in the world do you start a business? So I'm going to propose for our conversation today that there are 4 basic pieces, building blocks that intersect each other. And the first one is digital, which includes a variety of things, but just as a couple of examples, software is one thing that's super niche today. Why? Because the basics have already been done by Microsoft. So, what are you going to do? Build a word processing program? I don't think so. But you could build a very specialized program for dentists or something like that. Integration will be a huge continuing service. How do you put all these pieces of different software things together? All of us have worked with clients that have had a terrible problem integrating. Under distribution,
if I can make an observation here, Ron. As you know, my son Justin went to work for a company called Revenue Conduit, and literally all they did is they took the shopping store and Infusionsoft originally, and they built a bridge between them. And that bridge was really important to a lot of people because there was no connecting those two. As they got more sophisticated, they moved up and they did the same thing for HubSpot. That's an example, I think, of a couple of young entrepreneurs who said, hey, here's a niche. And, one was a programmer and the other one was more of a sales CEO type. And together they built a pretty good business.
Yeah, exactly. And Edgar, who we all know, doing specialty restaurant business right now in the midst of COVID to help them go online. Dave is kind of a specialist in doing integration, and they basically put together online systems from varieties of companies, and they've integrated the pieces so that they could build solutions. They're not actually building software, but they're creating new products as a result of the software. And so that's another example of where integration will be a big business for the next 10 to 20 years, I would say.
Right. Would you agree that apps too for cell phones are also a growth industry?
Yeah, I would include apps as the same thing as digital, and that's
Yeah. Yeah.
now
Yeah.
now I do think that there are potential issues with apps. Too many people have built apps that don't do anything,
Yeah.
and they're fairly simple to build. And the question is, do your customers really care about them? So that's another whole issue. And it goes right into our next subject, which is distribution, because if you have an app that people do use, you now have a direct link on their cell phone with your business. And so that's what you're doing there is not only is that integration and software, but that's now you've now broken the distribution quagmire, because now all you have to do is get your app on somebody's phone in order to have access to them.
Right.
So yeah, apps are a really big part of that, and a big part of the future. Now, the nice part about that is you can have a micro niche market, but you can have worldwide distribution. So literally, the little guy that sells a 10-cent widget, blue, couldn't make a living because he couldn't distribute it in the past. He only had access in his town to 15 people who wanted to buy that. But now worldwide, he's got access to maybe 1 million people. And so with an app or with the software, with the internet, he now has the opportunity to actually have a business in a very, very micro niche business. And that's one of the big opportunities. Today, the good businesses include closed or protected markets, those where you can try to get rid of, or you've managed to get rid of large competition. There are several examples of that. They mostly have to do with working for a supplier or subcontracting to somebody with a really good partnership that is not going to go away. Having multiple of those is a good idea. You don't want to rely on one, but that's one of the ways to help protect your business. Under local service and sale, what I'm really talking about here is by local support. I'm talking about the need to be able to do work for somebody who's fixed in place. And of course, that means a building, like a house. And so anybody who is serving, say plumbers and electricians who's serving a household, appliance repair people, appliance installation people, anybody having anything to do with that service is a good business that has room even today. Now there are niches where it's very tough. Ray and I worked for a garage door manufacturer, and there are only a few big garage door people in Southern California, and they have just cut the prices down to the bone. It'd be very difficult maybe to be in that kind of business. But for the most part, there's a lot of opportunity there, which means you need to know your business.
Well, wouldn't this be a good...
Go ahead.
Yeah, wouldn't Ben's business be an example of that, Ron?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit? Because I think it's kind of fascinating how he picked a niche and he's done very well in it.
Well, yeah, of course, I'm not sure that, he could say that he picked it. It kind of picked him as well, but he happened to be in a business and he saw an opportunity after he got into the business, and that's safety fences for pools to keep kids safe and from falling into pools. And that's turned out to be an extremely lucrative business for him. Because he managed to find the low-cost producer, so he was price competitive, and there are a lot of flakes in the business. There are only 3 or 4 manufacturers, so the competition is not terrible, but the service is generally not all that good. So all he had to do is properly train a few people and then be really good at delivering the product. And it's another business that was created through regulation. The only reason people buy them is because you have to have 2 barriers. If you've got any children under 6 or something like that, you've got to have two barriers, and one of the logical ones is to have a pool fence. So that's a really good example of that kind of business. And of course, there are many more that are on the industrial side of things as well. So not only home services, but business services. Somebody who understands how to fix a robot is going to be in huge demand, because
Well, interestingly enough, if I can, we've been working with an organization trying to look at what jobs are really growing, and the two that are growing most rapidly are related. One is a solar technician, the other one the wind tunnel technician, and number three is installing electrical charging stations. All three of those are growing very, very rapidly. So that's an example, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Now, something like the electrical charging business would be interesting, because it'll be local, it'll be subcontracted, and it'll have a short life. But the solar business, maintaining and repairing solar at a local level, should probably have a very long-term life. I don't know very much about how much maintenance is needed on solar, but I can imagine that they'll be around for decades and decades and decades. Yeah.
Right. What I was thinking about here, Ron, I understand what you're saying about gas station charging stations. What we're talking about is installing them in your home. The bottom line, when you get your Tesla home, you need to have it charged while you're waiting. And what I've learned, unless you have a 220 system, it could take 54 hours to recharge your battery on your Tesla at your house. So there's going to be a need for young technicians to be able to help people install these charging stations at their house. That's what I was referring to.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. My guess is that regular electrical technicians will pick up the slack, because it probably takes very little understanding for them to be able to install that.
Got it.
So there's
well,
already,
and also, I mean, if I can say this, because I think, the local service side, one of the issues that obviously we're dealing with is the lack of blue collar skilled people, and that includes electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and all those sort of people. And because we've had this push in terms of education, go to college, when literally, if they went to technical school, they could probably make as much or more money in a shorter amount of time. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you address here with local service and sales. There's this incredible opportunity. As I understand it, by the end of the decade, we could have 2.4 million jobs unfilled, because North End baby boomers like us have left those technical fields, and there's nobody to replace them.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, and those numbers sound very familiar, and I believe them to be the case. And so in a situation like that, somebody starting a business needs to become expert in that business, and then they have to do their best to niche themselves within that industry as a whole. Yeah. And now I think that there are some traditional new model type businesses out there as well. For instance, I mentioned that the internet and the delivery is there, but what I'm talking about is applying this new technology to an existing business that would create or transform a business. The dairy is an example of that. They have gone, in the time I've worked for them, delivering milk from notepads and picking up notes in people's boxes and just bringing milk out from the truck, whatever quantity they wanted, to a full-blown automation in terms of ordering, and of course the internet and that sort of thing. That was the first website that I ever built. It was probably the only website I ever built until recently, but I recognized that they needed a website early. And so 30% of their new signups are now online, whereas traditionally the entire industry does this. It's a door-to-door selling type of business. So they are just finishing an app that will go on all of their customer cell phones, because they're now using a computer of any type, and they can use their phone, but it's not optimized quite the way it should be. And so that's just the next step in terms of utilizing that. They're already in the delivery business. They've been in the delivery business since the beginning, as milk delivery implies, but we've been looking at lots of other systems to create faster delivery, have roving trucks that can, in fact, they already have roving trucks that go around, and if somebody has a broken bottle, or they need to have something replaced for whatever reason, or the quantity was wrong, one of these roving trucks gets the message immediately and simply takes it over to their house. And so, you've got this immediate response, immediate correction, and that could well turn into a on-demand delivery system, which would be completely unique in the industry, because they do, most deliveries go point to point. They've got a series of places to go, and they're different every day. Well, these folks go the same place every day. And so they're able to lower their costs by a factor 5 compared to almost any other delivery business. So that's an example of that.
Well, I think what's fascinating to me, Ron, about if I can say this, one of the things I've always enjoyed about watching you in this dairy business is how they've transformed themselves over the years. They've never stayed static. They've always been dynamically looking at what's going on to make themselves a better, embedded in the marketplace. If that's the way I should define it.
They have, and it's been a lot of fun to work with them for all these decades, and be a part of that. That's one of their attributes, is that they listen to their consultants, which is not always the case for most clients. So,
right.
And truly, that really has a lot to do with it. They're willing to.
Well, the truth is, you made them a lot of money.
Well, that's true. That's true. I'm happy to say that yes, I've helped them make a lot of money, and it's a very substantial business today. Another idea is to take a look at an existing restaurant or kitchen and think about lowering the overhead by moving it to a non-retail location and coupling that with delivery and pickup. It's like it's at this moment in time, that's not a wild idea, but it was a few months ago. Right. And the interesting thing is that one of the journal just reported that one of the founders of one of the ride service ones, I can't remember which one, if it was Grubhub or if it was Uber, but one of those, he sold his stock and he started a brand new company, and he is incognito buying up kitchens all over the country in industrial areas. The idea being that he's already figured this out, and he's putting his money where his thought is, and that is there will be 1 million chefs who want to do something special. All they have to do is rent a kitchen and pay for the delivery service that would theoretically allow 5 people to order from 4 or 5 different restaurants and have that delivered to their home, custom for that particular party.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can see the opportunity here of just rethinking the traditional business and turning that into a new model that's never been thought of before. Now that requires some capital, however. And then there's the final one, which I know both of you have a passion for, and that is, instead of trying to figure out, if you want to be in business, instead of trying to figure out all of these various trends and barriers, just buy an existing business. This is something that a lot of young people don't think about because they think they can't afford it. Now, they have to learn a lot. They've got to become experts in that particular business's product or service, but why not consider that? You could work to own, you could do a load down and have the owner carry it, or there's nothing wrong with looking for investors, building a good business plan that makes sense and looking for investors. So
Well, I really like that last segment there you put together, Ron,
thank you.
because the to start a business from an idea to actually implementing it and getting it successful, I would imagine the success rate is very, very low. And I think you'd be better off trying to
Yeah.
buy something that's already up and running, that already has some cash flow, and building your improvements based on that. And to me, that would seems to make a lot more financial sense, and also the opportunity of bringing investors in that are different than you are. They have different skill set. Again, adds further reduced risk that that business is going to fail, and that's important. So I really like that investor part and buying a business that's already functioning and going at that route rather than trying to do it all by yourself from an idea to the actual product being developed.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I certainly agree with that. That's my first retail business. We opened 7 stores there. I opened the first store with my previous bosses, and they gave me the opportunity to go into business. And I had worked for them for 4 years, so I knew the business intimately before I ever opened the door. And that's an important part. You've got to understand the business you're going into.
I also spent $20,000 investigating a business, a 24/7 home care business, trying to build from existing 6 people homes that are out there and taking, because they already have an infrastructure, they have staffing, and trying to build from that. And I started looking at the numbers, especially workers' comp, and it was astonishing to find out how difficult it was to bring in business. It was very hard to find people that could have customers that could afford to have somebody in their house 24 hours a day at even $25 an hour. It's a big number.
Yeah,
And,
it is.
After spending 20,000 investigating the situation, I decided to hand it over to my partner, who had the experience in the business, and he took it from there. It just wasn't for me. It was very inexpensive for me to spend 20,000 rather than ending up tabbing up a bill of $500,000 and then finding out the hard way that it wasn't for me.
yeah, right. Yeah, very, very
Right.
true. Let me sort of frame this real fast.
It seems to me
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Ron, go ahead and you can frame it. But it seems to me there's an opportunity for a business to sell fractional businesses. I mean, we know that bigger present stocks with big companies, but small businesses, if you find a good one, and then find investors and say, look, we're gonna provide some capital for you to be able to grow for a piece of the action or something. For ones that we evaluate that are meaningful. I just think there's an opportunity there. That's all.
Well, I think, yeah, I think it's a good idea. What it lacks is distribution in my mind. And I think we've talked about this among ourselves. There are brand new fractional home buying companies where you can buy a piece of a vacation home. The unique part of that is that there's nothing unique about partnerships. The unique part of that is that the distribution, once you decide to sell, is an existing model, which is the multiple listing service. So the MLS exists, and you simply take your fractional, you throw it in there. Now you've got an open market that realtors have access to. The problem that you're talking about for selling businesses is that there's no stock market for it. There's no way that you can access a fractional piece of a business that's a small business. And then you have regulations as well. But I agree, if there was a business would be to put together a stock market for small businesses, where you buy an eighth of a business and you can
Right.
spend $100,000 on it instead of having to buy, find
Right.
two people and put up 450 or 500,000 each.
Right. Yeah.
So absolutely. So I'm going to kind of summarize by saying that, when looking at a new business, the foundation is digital. You want digital operations, you want digital distribution, and you want, if you can, digital products. Everything that is digital should be digital about a new business. This is going to lower the cost. It's going to increase the access to markets, and it's going to solve distribution problems all in one fell swoop. So if we kind of look at the other pieces, the first thing that you overlap on that, of course, is the micro niche. Talked about that a million times, so I won't get into that, but you have to overlap the right niche on top of that. And then the best situation would be to have no specific location. It's like, I want to be able to move around. I want to move out of California and not destroy my business. I would like to be able to work from Hawaii. But even if you have a lot of people, how do you get out from being stuck in a location? Not that that's
Right.
bad. I think that being in a building in the right place, right time is a good thing, can be an excellent investment. But for a small person trying to start a business with very little money, don't think about a business that's location specific.
Right.
Try to find a business that needs very few employees. We know how difficult it is to hire people today, especially if they are trained. But if you can build a business that, now if you're doing a service business, you're probably going to have a proprietorship and maybe you have a helper. You're not going to, you may not ever develop a business with 20 people like a big plumbing business. But you don't need to have many employees to make a really
Right.
good living as a
Right.
plumber.
I mean, the bulk of business.
You're breaking up, Ray. I didn't quite get that. Well, let me continue. Let me continue. Maybe it'll get better. The product could be the brand if possible. That's an advantage. For instance, in my consulting business, I'm the brand. If it's a good brand or a bad brand is not the point. The point is that nobody else can sell what I'm doing because it's me. If you have Levi's brand, then nobody else is going to sell Levi's, even if you use Amazon. But if you're just an also-ran brand, you're going to get knocked off by Amazon and other competitors. And so you want to work very, very hard to make your brand as built into the product as you possibly can. That's a much longer discussion, and so I'll just kind of leave it there. And finally, I think it's just a smart thing is to try and figure out how to get multiple revenue streams. That's just, it's like if something goes wrong, something else might go right. The problem is matching multiple revenue streams up with very small niches isn't always easy to do. And so you have to be careful not to spread yourself into too many niches because that can be failure. Yet at the same time, it'd be nice to do multiple revenue streams. But for instance, if I were going to open a brand new business and I needed to have a location, I would open a business where I'd only utilize part of it, and then I'd rent out maybe 2/3 of it, so that would be another income stream. And so there are ways, if you think about it, to try and create other income streams other than just the one you have. So with that, guys, let's open it up and kind of kick ideas around and see if you think I'm right or wrong. Or
Well, there's one that I'd like to mention. I have some experience with condos, renting out condos and properties. And when I need somebody to clean one of my units, I need somebody to clean rather quickly. I found that calling some of the big brands out there that have the sophisticated internet communication systems, that it just takes forever to get a hold of somebody who can help me.
right.
And I think customer service should go on this on the slide also, because the people that are willing to answer the phone and talk to me got the business, and they got it quickly. And from what I understand, they're getting all the business because the other companies relying upon the digital communication process can't respond quick enough.
Well, let me just throw you a counter to that. Had you gone on a website and you checked what you wanted to have done, and then it popped up on the screen and it said, when would you like to schedule your appointment? And all you had to do is click the box that made sense for you. And they said, great, it's confirmed, we'll see you on that day. Do you think you would have bought?
No, I like the idea. And I call somebody, they pick up the phone and say, I'll be out there tomorrow.
Well, but you mean you don't trust the fact that if they say they're going to be there, that they won't be there?
Well, when I'm talking to a computer and talking to an internet, I'm not getting a response.
No, you got a
They're going to
response.
have somebody call me tomorrow.
You got a response.
I got 3 people lined up, ready to go, got it done.
No, but maybe you did. Maybe you did with the phone. I'm not suggesting it. What I'm suggesting is that you were there. We don't have robust, mature digital solutions yet in most businesses. Now, I don't know if you bought groceries
I think
online, but I can tell you that you know when they start shopping, you know when they've left the store, you know when they're coming up to your front door. You don't want to talk to anybody because nobody else is as good as the computer is.
Well, that's true, but I think what I'm hearing you say, and something that's missing, particularly in our generation, they want to talk to somebody. The younger people are very comfortable with the digital world and will very, very predominantly use it. In fact, like to have a conversation with somebody. But I think what Ed's saying is a niche in which, people who are committed to help those who are over 70 solve a problem are more likely to go to somebody that they talk to than a digital solution. So that in itself might be a business opportunity. Is that fair, Ed?
Yeah, I think it's exceptional customer service is what I'm talking about. I can call, there's certain people now I have on my Rolodex, I can call them anytime during the day or at night, and they will come out and take care of something for me because of our relationship without going through a digital solution.
Well, don't misunderstand me. And I think you both understand that I am absolutely pro customer service. Okay. What I'm suggesting is that we are infants in terms of what the digital is going to be doing. We don't have these solutions except for a very few places. And the delivery services have gotten so good that really I do not want to have to talk to somebody. I want to go on, want to put in the order.
The order.
And I want to know that it's been shipped and that it is on its way. It's 2 days away. It's 1 day away. It's going to be on my door. And you know what? No person will ever be able to do that for me. But the systems can. And that's what systems must do in order to solve the problem. Now,
but I think all I'm saying, Ron, is that we have different markets, and I think I agree with you. I think what you're saying, Ron, is the direction in which we're moving more and more. But what I heard Ed saying is that there is an incredible market for a niche for people who will do personal services. It makes Ed feel very comfortable to know he can pick up, and even if he has to leave a message, that message will be received and he'll get his job done. So it's not about one being better than the other. It's a niche.
I absolutely agree with that. And if you're a professional who does work on homes, then that's what you want. I have found because it's one thing if you've got several different apartments. Now you command a little bit of money. But if you have one house and you only have a plumbing job every 3 years, you are not going to get them to commit to do that because, frankly, you're not worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The second thing that I have to say about that is We're part of a dying business. How many over 70-year-old people are going to want to have commercial services like that? And the answer is fewer of us every year. Okay. Do we want to
That's
tell,
true. That's true.
do we want to tell these young people that, I mean, while it's really a good thing to tell them, pay attention to your market. I've got no problem with that. And older people like to talk on the phone. But the reason we like to talk on the phone is that the systems that we currently have are frustrating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why we don't
agree.
like it. So the problem with the system, it's not that they talk on the phone or do or don't talk on the phone. Now, a really good system, Ed, would have personal follow-up immediately when your digital system didn't solve the problem. So
Well,
I agree with
And
that.
I think my
Yeah, and
point, my point was not to discredit the digital, because I also agree that digital is really important. In fact, when I'm ordering parts that I need to get into the shop at a certain time, I love these digital solutions, because once I place the order, I can get daily reports on where in the heck that part is.
You bet.
Yeah.
When
Right.
it's going to be received. And then once it's received, there's a way of integrating it in with my inventory, so that I can service that customer properly with that part. So I think I'm not disagreeing with, I'm just saying that there's additional opportunities
Yep. Yes.
for certain types
Yes.
of businesses for exceptional customer service with or without the computer.
No,
Right.
I agree with that. But when we're talking about a small company that you don't want to hire people because you don't want to have to learn all these new rules for, vacation pay and family leave and all the rest, are you going to have an individual person that is going to be able to provide that service to you flawlessly? And the answer is no, never. Never will you have an individual person who can do that, because that person has to do the work. So then you say, well, but you can hire somebody to do that. Well, are you going to increase the cost by 30% in order to be able to have somebody answer the phone? And the answer might well be, yeah, I appreciate that. And maybe I would pay for that probably too, Ed. What I'm suggesting, though, is that to go into a business and think, I'm just going to have a phone and I'm going to do the work, that's the wrong way to think about a brand new business. You don't want to go into business just with that alone, because ultimately what will happen is you will make a mistake, because people are fallible. In order to have a perfect customer service system, you've got to have somebody sitting at a desk. You have to have the customer information in a computer. You've got to look it up, see what part it was that you used last time. You must have the entire history there. And that's true customer service.
But
Yeah.
when you're cleaning windows or you're cleaning condos, it's a little bit different. And it can be an exceptional customer service where you talk to someone, they're out the next day, you know who they are. I don't know quite yet whether there's a digital solution that can compete with that for that type of service. Not for ordering parts or more sophisticated.
See, what I'm suggesting is that a business that can serve you without good scheduling software is a business that's ready to fail, because they have good people, or they have people that don't have anything to do that can show up at the last minute for you. The only way you can actually do that business is to have a number of people and be able to fill the holes very easily and quickly, and tell you, sorry, we can't be there tomorrow, but we've got a spot the day after that. Do you want to take it or not? You can't do it with 2 or 3 people, because you cannot be efficient scheduling that way. You just can't. It's impossible to do for one human to schedule that and be available for every single customer.
I think it depends on the size of the business.
Yeah, I think
have a
we're
lot
arguing,
of
we're arguing two very different things here. I
small
think
business
what Ed's saying, what Ed's saying, as I understand it, we are posturing. There is opportunities for businesses that Ed wants, that you want, and that I want. I love being on Amazon and knowing they'll track and let me know your package will arrive tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and then it tells you it's arrived, it's sitting on your porch. I mean, that's wonderful.
I don't know how you compete against that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the neat about this, what Ed's saying is that for smart young businessmen, they're listening to this and they're saying, what can I do to be able to serve a client like Ed? How can I put together a business that would serve him?
What I'm suggesting is Ed could go to Amazon and he could say, I need my windows cleaned and I need them done tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have somebody? And they either say yes or no. Yeah. Or if they come back and they say, we understand that you need this, 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 and this. And the first time we're going to be able to deliver that service to you day after tomorrow. Would you like it? What's the difference? I think it's a psychological difference. You're still delivering the same thing, assuming the quality is going to be appropriate. And they should have lots of quality indicators to make sure their people are giving you the same service over and over. But I'm suggesting that there's really no difference between 3 hours of window cleaning and a carpet that's going to be delivered. What's the difference?
No, there is no difference.
Okay,
but Ron, it's like,
I'm glad we got to that.
You're now acting as though you're the customer, and the customer is saying, "Fine, Ron, that was wonderful. I want to talk to somebody."
Well, that's okay. And so the reason
so that's what he's saying.
Ed's having trouble. But the reason Ed's having trouble finding somebody is because those kinds of businesses don't seem to have the structure to be able to even exist.
No, that's very possible. And we're not Ron, we're not arguing with you. What we're saying is that a little old lady may say, I'm kind of lonely here. I'd really like to talk to somebody.
I think we do,
even if it's only because.
Let's move on.
And that's a service. That's a business.
I'd like to throw out at you, and that is the importance of scheduling labor through outside companies. It seems very difficult sometimes to have your workforce fully developed and trained, et cetera, without using some supplementary outside labor service. I see this in a lot of businesses. And it seems like a pretty good opportunity to start a business if you can find the people to do it. And for some reason, some people don't want to work for a company. They rather have they work for an agency, and I really don't understand why, but it does happen.
Well, this is exactly the reason that sort of the number 2 point was try to start a business that doesn't need any employees. You see, I mean, if you want to build a business and you want to keep your sanity, if you build it around digital stuff and not people, you'll have an opportunity.
That's a good point.
See, you can't scale a business that has a bunch of people. To go into a window cleaning business is insanity in my mind, because that is nothing but a human person problem that you have to deal with. You can't make very much money doing that. And so, because the markups are very poor, and then now you're saying, but we need to look outside and get people to help us. And I'm saying, forget the employees to start with. Don't even start that business.
Window business. My comments have to do with manufacturing companies, distribution companies, dealerships, et cetera, that need supplemental labor at times during the year to get the job done, to meet the expectations of the customers.
No, I get that. Right. And we're talking about what kind of a business would you start today? And I didn't anywhere advocate that we ought to be out starting manufacturing operations.
No, but what Ed's saying, let me see if I understood you, Ed. What Ed's saying is that the current model for providing temporary services has lots of room for improvement, digital and otherwise. And this is a real good business opportunity that you can start today. Is that what you're saying, Ed?
I was just asking Ron, based upon his research, his understanding of everything, whether starting a small little, starting a labor supply business for installing carpets or whatever, specialized labor, whether you saw that to be an opportunity for starting a new business or not.
The only part that I would start there would be the software that would contact and schedule those people. And that's called Angie's List already. There are already systems that have done that. So I don't think that there's an opportunity in there right now that's just wanting, that needs to be created. So my response would be, anytime you're trying to hire folks that are low wage, not very dependable, have other issues in their lives, that's a business to not ever go into today.
No,
Now,
these are
you might be in that business already.
Trades people that have skills of doing something that other people can't do.
Well, that's fine. Those businesses exist. So I would ask you, where do you see an opportunity, a market for that? Because it exists today.
I see it all the time in different types of businesses. If you got a carpet business, you're selling carpet, you really don't want to have your own people installing the carpet, because you got to keep them on the payroll for the full year. Certain times of the year you're busy, certain times you're not. Seems to me there would be an opportunity to utilize a company that supplies specialized labor. So now it's a variable expense rather than a fixed cost for that business.
You're right, and that business already exists. Carpet people often use contractors to lay floor. They sell it and they use contractors. That exists now. There's a lot of opportunity for improvement, I would guess, because I don't think there's any, there's not a digital way to find those people, schedule those people, et cetera. Now there may be, but I don't know about it. And so if your job was to sell floor coverings and you needed installers, it'd be really great to simply say, I'm signing up for this system, and I want to match the customer's availability with the installer's availability. And it just pulls it together and does it, confirms. You say they're going to come out on such and such a time. Now that happens. I've done that with appliance repair. I bought stuff from Lowe's and from Home Depot, and they've done exactly that. They have networks of people. The guys get out here and they say, "Oh yeah, I work over at Harlow's." Yeah, Harlow's has me 3 days, and then I freelance the other 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
They're already here. That's all I'm saying, is that they're really here. But as a brand new business, why would you want to go into a business where you decided you would have a bunch of carpet layers and you would farm those out? See, they don't need you to tell them what to do. They can join these systems already. They're the ones who have the business to start.
I don't understand why, but certain people do not want to work for a company, and I just find that bizarre. I don't know why.
Well, I'm one of those people.
I'm one of those.
and I realize I'm a bizarre kind of person, but
that's why we like each other, Ron.
I just have never, Ray hasn't worked for many people either. There is something that some people's personality basically says, I'm going to do it myself, and I want to figure it out on my own.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering also if there's a government regulation, again, that's motivating people to work this way rather than working for a company. And, you talked about regulations early on in your presentation. I think regulations dictate how a lot of companies do business.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
And that's all I'm, is there might be an opportunity, might be a sweet spot for somebody to avoid some regulations.
One of the sweet spots I see for the three of us is that I've always wondered why there couldn't be a suite of services that could be offered to a starting business that would take care of his HR, his CFO problems, his marketing problems, etc. So all he had to do, like the guy we're talking about, is focus on what he's good at, which is running CNC machines. And so those kind of services would prevent him from having to deliver or create all these on his own. That to me is a business opportunity.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there are many of those kinds of business opportunities, and I think they fit very directly into, you know, the model of build a digital platform, don't have very
Okay.
many
Yep.
employees. Yeah, absolutely. And they're untold numbers of them. We can't even imagine what kinds of businesses could be out there, because there are probably millions of niche opportunities for people to start small businesses. And the nice part about tomorrow is that you can turn a small business into a large revenue business and not have very many people.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
difference between
Yes.
what
that's
it was 5, 10, 15 years ago and the opportunities that are in front of us. That is the crux of it right there.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, we've been at this now for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Is there any more we want to add, or do we want to think about our next show?
Well, I think we'll do that offline.
I think that I just thought this was a great presentation, and it just opens your mind and look at opportunities out in the marketplace for how you could start a business.